Hey everyone, real quick before we get into today's video, I wanted to talk about Chilling, the awesome horror app I'm partnered with. In case you haven't heard, every week I have new stories that release over on Chilling. There are now over 1,000 stories on Chilling, with a bunch of other YouTube narrators and professionals to choose from. On Chilling, you can do things that you've never been able to do on YouTube. You can choose from over 1,000 individual stories that are sorted into curated playlists, or you can create your own. On Chilling, we give you so much flexibility to listen the way you want. This includes a chilling, game-changing feature, our Ambient Menu. You can change the background sounds of the story at any time to fit your mood. Go from rain to a campfire with the press of a button. It's totally revolutionary and you need to try it. There have been a number of awesome updates to Chilling, such as the ability to download stories for offline listening, and the new social feature, as you can now discuss your favorite stories with other users and friends. And we're just getting started. Not only are we adding hours of new content every week, but original video content is also in the works. Chilling is evolving into a must-have for all horror lovers. So feel free to head over and start your free trial over on Chilling and check out my personal playlist there. And don't forget, Chilling is giving away an Xbox Series X. Follow the link in the description below and enter by August 31st, and the winner will be announced around September 2nd, 2022. When Tiffany Taylor woke up in the backseat of the car and felt the stranger's hand wrap around her throat, she tried all she could to push him off. But it was only then that she realized in horror that a pair of steel handcuffs had secured her wrists behind her back. Not only that, but what could only be duct tape had been wrapped around her head, almost completely sealing her mouth and nostrils. The stranger held her down, brutally violating her in a way that caused Tiffany to scream, cry, and bite her tongue. The tears which streamed down her face, along with the blood from her bitten tongue, caused the duct tape to loosen slightly, just enough for her to be able to say, "Please don't kill me. I'm pregnant." She didn't expect the man to reply, but what he said in response was more horrifying than she could have possibly imagined. "I know you are," the stranger said. "Don't worry, I've done this before. It'll be over soon, it'll be quick, and when I'm done with you, no one will ever find you." The attack took place during the summer and fall months of 2016, a time when a brutal, merciless serial killer turned inner city New Jersey into his own personal hunting ground. In the space of just less than 3 months, he attacked 4 different women after using his cell phone to research the most efficient ways to kill and dispose of human corpses. He also used his cell phone to research not only the fastest route to his target, but also alternate routes that cops might not take should they be contacted. He was shrewd, cruel, and calculating, and for a hot minute, all law enforcement could do was hope that their man slipped up somehow and handed them a lucky break. But for 4 women who bore the scars of this man's evil, hope wasn't enough, and patience wouldn't cut it. So incredibly, they hatched a plan to catch one of the most dark-hearted murderers New Jersey has ever seen. Robin West had an awful upbringing. As a result of severe mental illness, she spent a long spell of her youth at Wordsworth Academy, a treatment facility in West Philadelphia. Young people with behavioral and mental health issues. It was supposed to be to be a place where Robin could escape from a dangerous and abusive home life, but the rundown academy and its over-strict, under-caring system proved no better for her. Yet despite such hardship, Robin developed a strong character and an effortless style of charm and humor. It was the style that helped her win clients at the club where she worked as an exotic dancer. But Robin also earned money on the side as a call girl, placing ads on websites which proposed discreet meets in Philly hotels. In August of 2016, one of Robin's friends suggested a trip to Newark, New Jersey, where they would visit a rundown neighborhood where
Make him look.
discreet meets in Philly hotels. In August of 2016, one of Robin's friends suggested a trip to Newark, New Jersey, where they would visit a rundown neighborhood where
Make him look. Look. Look.
call girls are known to ply their trade. It was a surefire way of making a quick buck when work back in Philly was slow, so the two booked a room at a small motel before heading back to look for potential clients. Then, at around 11 p.m. on August 31st, Robin and her friend headed over to Nye Avenue, a derelict collection of burned-out homes punctuated by overgrown yards and an abandoned train yard. One of the first cars to slow to a crawl alongside them was a silver sedan. Most men tend to be awkward and nervous when interacting with call girls in an illegal setting, but this one seemed polite and charming in comparison. When asked which of the girls he wanted, the driver pointed to Robin, who was wearing a red Nike hat, sultry black shirt, and black shorts with sparkling orange sandals. "Be careful with my sister, because I love her," Robin's friend said, watching as she climbed in the passenger seat. As a precaution, she saved the vehicle's license plate number as a contact in her cell phone, just in case she'd need to contact law enforcement. But the provision did her no good. She'd never see her friend again. As the very next day, Robin's scorched remains would be found in the smoking ruins of an abandoned home in Orange, New Jersey, with one veteran firefighter saying hers were the most charred cadaver he'd ever come across in all his years of service. She was so badly burned that she had to be identified by her dental records, with the day of her death being only 8 days after her 19th birthday. Due to the positioning of the body and the way in which the fire had spread throughout the building, authorities were almost certain of foul play, and with the help of Robin's friend, who provided the suspect's vehicle's license plate, they were almost certain that they could find the killer. Yet a major concern was that he might strike again before being apprehended. If the media got whiff of a serial killer, all chaos would break loose. But the killer would strike again. The only question was, when and who? Born in Augusta, Maine, 33-year-old Joanne Billy Joe Brown was raised in a loving family and was popular among her peers. But after being diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, she understood why she was so unhappy when she had so few reasons to feel that way. By all accounts, proper diagnoses and treatment enabled Joanne to get a grip on her mental illness, and she showed an admirable amount of positivity and determination in her quest to conquer her condition. But she still felt different from other people. Not apart, just different. She couldn't see herself holding down regular hours or some routine job, instead putting to use her passion for fashion and hairstyling by becoming an exotic dancer. It was through her employment as an exotic dancer that Joanne became an escort. And it was through her escort work that she ended up meeting a man in the parking lot of a Popeyes on Newark's South Side in October of 2016. Several weeks later, on December 5th, a group of construction workers pulled up outside 354 Highland Avenue near Branch Brook Park. The homeowner wanted the property renovated with a view to making it a rental, and had asked the workers to inspect the house before sending him an estimate. A pair of the workers decided to take a look around the first floor, but as they arrived at the landing, they stopped dead in their tracks. One of the men called back down the stairs, telling his boss that it looked like someone was asleep on the dusty wooden floor. But they weren't asleep. It was Joanne Brown, and she was dead. Someone had wrapped her head in duct tape, from her eyes down to her chin, and strangled her with a jacket. The killer's next victim was a young woman named Sarah Butler. A competitive dancer with a passion for ballet, modern, jazz, and African dance, Sarah worked hard to pursue her passion. She worked multiple jobs, eventually saving enough money for a used car. Then, following her high school graduation, she drove the 15 miles to New Jersey City University, becoming the first member of her family to enroll in college. But college life wasn't nearly as social as she imagined, so Sarah found herself creating an account on a social media site known as Tagged, a kind of platonic Tinder with more emphasis on companionship than Netflix and chill, so to speak. It's there that she found the profile of a guy whose username was Little Yacht Rock. Little Yacht Rock also immediately began asking if Sarah wanted to make some money. She wittily responded that she was not into the credit card scams, lol. But Little Yacht Rock assured her he was serious and that he'd pay $500 to sleep with her. $500 was a lot of money to a broke college student like Sarah, and Little Yacht Rock had a very handsome profile picture, but after arranging a meeting that same evening, she changed her mind and stood him up. Yet for some reason 2 days later, Sarah sent Little Yacht Rock the following message. "Sorry about the other day, I got really nervous," Sarah's message read. "I felt terrible, but your voice and your pic don't seem like a match." "I'm a really cool guy when you get to know me," Little Yacht Rock replied. "Let's meet up tonight if you're free." "Sure, but you're not a serial killer, right?" This particular message of Sarah's has a sick resonance to it today. Little Yacht Rock assured her he wasn't, and the couple arranged to meet on the first day of Thanksgiving break. On the day of her date with Little Yacht Rock, Sarah messaged him on Tag to confirm the meeting place. Then that evening, Sarah borrowed her parents' minivan and drove out alone into the clear, windy night to the address she'd been given, 354 Highland Avenue in Orange, New Jersey. The very same house that Joanna Brown had been murdered in just weeks before. When Little Yacht Rock greeted her with a smile and climbed into the minivan, Joanna Brown's cold, dead face was still wrapped in duct tape. And soon, so would Sarah Butler's. When he was done, he dragged her body behind a trailer on the wooded hillside of Eagle Rock Reservation. But on this occasion, he was careless in the disposal, simply covering her body with leaves and twigs with her lifeless limbs sticking out from underneath. Sarah had promised her parents that she would be home by 8 p.m., but when the hour came and went, a close friend of Sarah's became concerned. She began texting around mutual friends to check if any of them had seen her, and as the trickle of replies came in, it became quite clear that something was wrong. The following morning, Sarah's mother, Laverne Butler, called her daughter's cell phone to find it went immediately to voicemail. This was extremely out of character for Sarah, who was famous for carrying her charger on her person wherever she went. A panic rose and Sarah's family hastily contacted the police. 3 days later, on November 25th, a friend of Sarah's happened to spot her mom's blue minivan tucked away behind the derelict factory building. But Sarah was still nowhere to be found. It was obvious that their friend was in danger, and there was only so much the local law enforcement could do to find her. It was with growing frustration that Sarah's friends decided to take matters into their own hands. They drove to the Butler's family home, where Laverne was only too happy to give them access to Sarah's laptop. The friends spent the following few hours searching through Sarah's post history, logging into her various social media profiles, and perusing the message section for any clues to her whereabouts. Obviously, one of these profiles was Sarah's tagged account, and it was there that they found her messages with Little Yacht Rock, paying particular interest to the fact that they'd obviously arranged some kind of meetup, one that was scheduled for the night before she went missing. They saw everything: the offer of cash for intimacy, the man's apparently desperate desire to meet her as soon as possible, and they saw something was hideously wrong. At this point, I think we can all agree that Sarah's friends showed an astonishing amount of character and fortitude when they made a decision to catfish the man who had potentially kidnapped or killed their friend. One of Sarah's friends, Samantha Rivera, created a fake profile untagged using a generic hot girl display picture, then sent Little Yacht Rock's profile a thumbs up. It didn't take long for him to take the bait, and just like with their missing friend, he began offering money if Samantha would sleep with him. The money, the rush, all of it mirrored his text to Butler before she disappeared. Immediately, the women were suspicious. As messages progressed to a call, Rivera pressed a button to place Little Yacht Rock on speakerphone. Thinking on the fly, the friends opened the camera on their own phone and recorded the conversation on video. Little Yacht Rock wanted to meet Samantha, and soon, he was completely unaware of the net that was slowly closing around him. After a prolonged back and forth while the girls stalled for time, Samantha agreed to meet Little Rock Yacht at Panera Bread in Montclair. The location was everything, as it was situated in a strip mall just minutes away from the local police headquarters. Instead of meeting up with Samantha, Little Yacht Rock found himself confronted with 2 homicide detectives sent to intercept him. However, Little Yacht Rock had told Samantha his name was Taj, but the name he was to the detectives was the name on his driver's license, his real name, Khalil Wheeler Weaver. Given that the cops had no way of knowing what Little Yacht Rock looked like and only had a rough idea of his age and gender, they found themselves unable to take the man into custody, given that he seemed to have a perfectly innocent reason for being at the Panera Bread. They were forced to let him go, but thanks to the net laid out by Samantha Rivera and friends, his time and his luck were running out. 5 days after Sarah Butler's body was found, lying in the weeds near the Eagle Rock Reservation parking lot, Khalil Wheeler Weaver was in police custody. Sarah's friends are the first true heroes in this case, the lead Essex County prosecutor was quoted as saying. He also made it clear that although Khalil Wheeler Weaver left enough of a trail for police to catch him, their efforts might well have been impossible without the amateur investigation conducted by Samantha and company. Without them, a cunning and deadly serial killer might still be walking the streets, and there's no doubt that Khalil would have killed again. He researched ways to kill people using relatively undetectable household items such as bleach and drain cleaner. He plotted ways to murder his victims while remaining almost completely undetected, and using a variety of social media profiles and a plethora of different aliases to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Yet still, he was brought low by the effort of a few concerned and loving friends, along with one more woman, the pregnant Tiffany Taylor. Cut back to her being strangled in the basement of her own car. The man who's about to murder her used many usernames while talking to women online, but his real name was Khalil Wheeler Weaver. Yet just as he was about to finish her off, he remembered something. "Where's your phone?" he asked suddenly. It's back at the Ritz," Tiffany replied, "room 32. As she spoke, she felt his grip around her neck slacken. "Oh no," Khalil replied, a hint of fear entering his voice. "We gotta go back and get that phone." Tiffany knew she'd found a weakness, a piece of evidence he couldn't allow to exist, and as he drove them both back to the motel to retrieve the cell phone, Tiffany was presented with an opportunity to save her own life. As long as she can remember, Tiffany had been double-jointed, and as she sat in the back seat of the car she was now captive in, she folded her left thumb into her palm and silently wrenched one hand free of the cuffs. Her prospective killer neither saw nor suspected a thing. Her plan was to wait until he hit a stoplight, then hook the handcuff chain around his neck from the back seat, strangling him before he had a chance to kill her. There was every chance he would put his foot down and send the vehicle plowing into oncoming traffic at breakneck speeds, but Tiffany already accepted she was going to die if she didn't do something. If she could take her captor with her, so be it. Yet in a stroke of bad luck, the vehicle didn't hit a single red light on its way back to the motel. But as it pulled into the parking lot, Tiffany had another idea. She slipped her hand back into the handcuffs and played the helpless victim for a few more moments to lull her captor into a false sense of security. Khalil opened the back door and tore the duct tape from her face. He then draped a jacket across her shoulders to hide the handcuffs and explained the plan. She was to walk upstairs while he would trail a few feet behind. After she retrieved the phone, they would leave together, and he would find a place to kill her. Tiffany followed the plan to the letter and soon arrived at the mustard yellow door of room 32. But room 32 wasn't empty. Inside was a companion of Tiffany's, one who had a rampant, long-term heroin addiction. Tiffany had promised to return with heroin following her date with Khalil, and the person inside was practically watching the doorknob in anticipation of her return. All Tiffany had to do was kick the door once, and it opened almost instantly. Khalil was under the impression that he'd have to open the door himself and had no time to react to Tiffany as she dived into the motel room. When officers from Elizabeth Police Department responded to Tiffany's 911 call at 9:28 p.m., Khalil was still there, watching police from the shadows. Taylor isn't fond of courthouses, nor is she a fan of law enforcement, but she swallowed her pride to help put a vicious serial killer behind bars. During his trial, she sat in the witness box and faced Khalil, looking him in the eyes despite him refusing to return her gaze. "I wanted him to see me," Taylor said. "I wanted him to know that it was me." Every word of that final statement is true. It was her who helped put him away. The police might have filed the charge against Khalil Wheeler Weaver, but it was Robin West's friend who recorded Wheeler Weaver's license plate. Joanne Brown's friend helped police connect Khalil to the spot where she was kidnapped, along with the abandoned house where her body was found, while Samantha Rivera and her friends established Wheeler Weaver's methodology, using his phone to track women, offering cash, then rushing them to meet. After being pronounced guilty by a jury of his peers, Khalil Wheeler Weaver has yet to be sentenced for his crimes, but it's more than likely he'll receive multiple life sentences along with additional time for kidnapping and other crimes. By finding Wheeler Weaver online and luring him into a trap with police, these women risked their lives. He believed he was hunting his next victim, but in reality, they were the ones hunting him. On August 24th of 1940, Richard Biegenwald's Staten Island upbringing was the stuff of nightmares. His father was a violent alcoholic and beat his son brutally on a daily basis. By the time Richard was just 5 years old, the abuse had gotten so bad that he tried to burn down the family home. Following the dangerous outburst, so rare in one as young as he, Richard was sent for observation at the Rockland County Psychiatric Center. He was released shortly afterward and returned to the guardianship of his parents, but Richard's home life didn't improve any. In fact, it only got worse. By age 8, Richard claimed he was drinking alcohol and gambling, and that his parents chose to deal with his behavioral problems by forcing him to undergo electroshock therapy, a term that is something of an oxymoron. Used as a treatment for major depressive disorders, catatonia, or prolonged mania, side effects of electroshock therapy can include confusion, loss of motor function, and severe memory loss. The long-term memories of those subjected to ECT have been known to suffer dramatically, with famous examples being that of Townes Van Zandt, a legendary country singer who lost most of his childhood memories as a result of the treatment, and it had almost exactly the same effect on Richard. Rare memories of a mostly miserable childhood were now gone forever, and all he was left with was the pain of abuse and abandonment by a family he barely knew. Following the electroconvulsive therapy, Richard's behavior took a sharp turn for the worse. He was moved to the State Training School for Boys in Warwick, New York, an institution designed to curb his darker inclinations before they could take root. Yet none of the treatments prescribed by the teams of highly experienced child psychologists did anything to properly socialize young Richard. He regularly stole from other students, routinely started fights, and instigated multiple escape attempts involving himself and other students. Needless to say, he was a handful, and his behavior remained atrocious even on trips home to his mother's place in Staten Island. He held an incredible amount of resentment for her, and saw his enrollment at the training school as evidence that he was unloved and unwanted. In response, he stole his mother's money, defied her curfews, and at one point, in an attempt to prevent his return to the training school, an 11-year-old Richard set himself on fire with lighter fluid and matches. After recovering from the burns, Richard spent another 5 years at the training school, transferring to high school at 16, but dropping out shortly afterward. Richard then lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a couple of years, but returned to the Northeast in 1958 after a conviction for vehicle theft, whereupon he settled in the state of New Jersey. It's there in the city of Bayonne that Richard decided to rob a grocery store of the night of December 18th, 1958. It was the week before Christmas and Richard was broke, but he knew that the local grocery stores would be fat with cash thanks to the marked uptick in holiday sales. He hit one mom-and-pop grocery store with an accomplice known only as Frank, and in order to gain access to the on-site safe, he came face-to-face with the owner and proprietor, Stephen Slodowski, who also happened to be an attorney and public prosecutor. According to witness statements, Slodowski appeared to have made the mistake of assuming he could reason with a man like Richard. He used his experience as an officer of the court to assure the men that if they quit before anyone got hurt or any money was stolen, they'd receive leniency from a judge who might well take pity on financial hardships during the holiday season. He poked and prodded at Richard's fragile ego until he snapped, putting a bullet in Slodowski's head before he could even open the safe. Richard and his accomplice went on the run, but were picked up a few days later in Maryland. He was extradited back to New Jersey, convicted of murder, and spent the next 17 years of his life in one of the Garden State's maximum security prisons. At his parole hearing, Richard assured the authorities that he was fully rehabilitated. He told the board that he was deeply ashamed that the behavior of his youth had culminated in the murder of an innocent father and public servant, and that he'd spent the last 17 years wishing he could take it back. Satisfied he'd paid his debt to society, Richard was then released from prison where he worked various odd jobs over the years that followed. He generally kept a low profile, adhering to his parole conditions, and only once missed a meeting with his parole officer. He was arrested in 1980 on suspicion of a serious assault, but when the victim failed to pick him out of a police lineup, he was released without charge. To outside observers, it appeared that Richard was actually changing his ways for the better, and he even managed to find himself a wife, moving into a small Asbury Park home with her shortly afterward. It's here that the Biegenwalds befriended their neighbors, who turned out to be the only people with the insight on just how little Richard had changed. At first, the neighbors found Richard to be a quiet and unassuming man. He knew he'd spent some time in prison, but were too polite to ask what the conviction was. To him, Richard was a reformed criminal, one who deserved to be given a second chance. Sure, he had some unusual interests, but otherwise he seemed harmless. But one day, on a visit to the Biegenwalds' home, Richard showed one of his neighbors something that took their breath away. The neighbor woman had made fast friends with Richard's wife, and when he asked if she wanted to see something in the garage, she had no reason to suspect it was anything untoward. But after leading her into the garage and pulling back a large sheet, Richard revealed the dead body of a young woman, saying he had gotten her out on the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore. His wife's friend was utterly horrified, but somehow played it cool enough to escape the residence without raising Richard's suspicion before hastily contacting the police. The cops surrounded Richard's house on January 22nd of 1983, where they found him hanging out with an old prison buddy of his, Darren Fitzgerald. Given that he had a history of shootouts with police, they knew there was a good chance he'd opt to die in a firefight than come quietly. So, rather than risk the lives of innocent civilians in the surrounding homes, a police SWAT team came up with a rather cunning plan. A plainclothes police officer essentially faked a collision with Richard's car, then caused enough of a scene outside to cause Richard to step out of his house to investigate. Once he'd stepped off the porch, the SWAT team made their move, tackling the ex-con before taking him into custody. Darren Fitzgerald was also arrested, suspected of being an accomplice in the murders, and in a manner of speaking, he was. But when questioned by police, Darren told them any assistance given to Richard was purely the result of terror and coercion. He had no idea his old jail buddy had taken to killing again, especially not defenseless young women. And if detectives hadn't swooped in to capture him when they did, there's no telling how many more he would have killed. Darren said Richard was stockpiling a variety of conventional and not-so-conventional weaponry that he planned to use in scores of additional murders, and that was backed up by evidence taken from the Biegenwalds' home. Officers seized a large cache of weapons and illegal drugs from Richard's residence, which included several pipe bombs, handguns, rifles, shotguns, a machine gun, large amounts of marijuana, and floor plans for several of the area's notable residencies and businesses. Police also made the disturbing discovery of a rohypnol and chloral hydrate stash, two sedatives with memory-erasing side effects. But even more terrifying was the live puff adder that Richard kept in his basement, along with a collection of syringes and venom-collecting equipment. The puff adder probably accounts for more deaths than any other snake in Africa, with an adult having enough venom to kill 5 grown men. It's terrifyingly clear that Richard Biegenwald was planning on injecting people with snake venom, a silent and potentially untraceable crime that would be the calm before the pipe bomb and machine gun storm. The people of New Jersey can thank their lucky stars that Richard was caught before he could subject them to such a horrifying and deadly ordeal. During his trial, the media dubbed Richard the Jersey Shore thrill killer after it came to light that he'd lured a girl off of the Asbury Park boardwalk, shooting her in the head just so he could watch her die. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty, recommending a sentence of death by lethal injection. But over the years, Richard was on and off death row as a series of appeals came to a fluctuating set of conclusions as to what his punishment should be. In August 1991, the death sentence was overturned for good, and Richard was locked away in the New Jersey State Prison, never to taste freedom again. Then on March 10th of 2008, Corrections Department spokeswoman confirmed that Richard had died from a combination of both respiratory failure and kidney failure at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. It was a whimpering end to a man whose lifestyle meant that he had been more than likely to go out with a bang. And we all owe a debt of gratitude to the brave neighbor woman who contacted the police, as well as the police officers who took him into custody. The extent of Richard's conventional and biological arsenal of weapons is truly terrifying, and there's no doubt he was planning something that would result in a catastrophic loss of life. And the whole snake venom aspect meant New Jersey was lucky enough to dodge perhaps its most infamous serial killer, one as evil